Some mornings begin without any clear reason. You wake up not because you feel rested, but because your body knows it is time to stand up. The room looks the same. The light through the window has not changed. Your phone is where you left it last night. Nothing is wrong. And yet, something feels heavy. You lie there for a few seconds longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why getting out of bed feels like work. This was how that period of my life began. Not with a big failure, not with a dramatic loss, just with a quiet tiredness that stayed. Every day followed the same pattern. I woke up, I washed my face. I made something simple to eat. I went to work. I came home. I slept. From the outside, it looked like a normal life. But inside, there was a strange feeling of being disconnected, as if I was moving through my days on autopilot. At work, I did what was expected. I answered emails. I finished tasks. I nodded during conversations. People around me talked about plans, about the future, about things they were excited to do next. I listened. I smiled. But I rarely added anything. It was not that I had nothing to say. It was that I did not know what I felt anymore. During lunch breaks, I often sat alone. Not because I wanted to be alone, but because being around people required energy I did not have. I would look at my food, eat slowly, and watch the minutes pass. Sometimes I checked my phone. Sometimes I did nothing at all. There was a quiet question in my mind, one that never fully formed into words. Is this all there is right now? In the evenings, the tiredness felt deeper. Not physical, something else. I would come home, take off my shoes, and sit on the edge of the bed. The room was silent. Too silent. I turned on the light, then turned it off again, as if I could not decide what I wanted. I did not feel sad. I did not feel happy. I felt empty. On some nights, I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, watching other people live their lives. Trips, celebrations, smiling faces. I knew those moments were only parts of their lives, not the full story. Still, it made my own days feel smaller. I started to notice how slow time felt. A week felt long. A month felt endless. There was no clear moment I could point to and say, this is when things went wrong. That made it harder. When nothing is clearly broken, you do not know what to fix. Friends would ask, "How are you?" I answered, "I'm fine." And in a way, that was true. I was functioning. I was surviving. But surviving is different from living. Some days I felt tired before the day even began. Other days I felt nothing at all. Both were difficult. Weekends did not feel special. They felt like pauses, not rest. I slept more, but I did not feel refreshed. I went out sometimes, but I felt distant, as if I was watching myself from the outside. There was a moment I remember clearly. One evening, I was standing in line at a small store, waiting to pay. The line was slow. No one was impatient. Nothing unusual was happening. And suddenly, I felt an unexpected tightness in my chest. Not panic, not fear, just a quiet realization. I have been living like this for a while now. That thought stayed with me the entire walk home. It was not dramatic. It did not change anything immediately. But it was honest. That night, I did not try to distract myself. I did not scroll. I did not play music. I sat in the dark, letting the silence exist. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to admit something simple. I'm tired. Not of work, not of people. I am tired of not knowing why I'm doing any of this. That admission did not bring relief, but it brought clarity. In the days that followed, nothing on the outside changed. My routine stayed the same. My life looked the same. But inside, I started paying attention to how often I felt disconnected, to how rarely I felt present. I noticed how I rushed through moments, even when there was no need to rush. I noticed how often I avoided being alone with my thoughts. There were small moments, quiet moments, when I caught myself breathing more slowly, nigh standing at a bus stop, washing dishes, walking home at night. Those moments did not solve anything, but they were real. I began to understand that this period of my life was not about finding answers yet. It was about noticing where I was, about admitting that I felt lost without demanding that I immediately find a direction. Some phases in life do not ask us to move forward quickly. They ask us to stay still long enough to feel what we have been avoiding. I did not suddenly feel motivated. I did not suddenly feel hopeful, but I felt present. And for that time in my life, that was enough. Enough to keep going. Enough to listen. Enough to wait. Because sometimes, before life changes, it slows down. And sometimes, feeling lost is not a failure. It is a quiet pause before something else begins. The days after that realization did not feel lighter. They felt quieter. It was not the kind of quiet that brings peace. It was the kind that makes every sound more noticeable. The sound of footsteps in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator at night, the distant noise of traffic outside the window. Everything felt closer. I went on with my routine, but I moved through it more slowly. In the mornings, I stopped checking my phone immediately after waking up. Not because I made a decision, it just happened. I lay there, watching the light change on the wall, listening to the sounds of the building waking up. Someone upstairs moved a chair. A door closed somewhere down the hall. Life was happening, even if I felt unsure about my place in it. At work, I noticed how often my mind drifted away. I would read the same sentence twice, sometimes 3 times, not because it was difficult, but because my thoughts were elsewhere. I started to recognize that familiar feeling, the one where your body is present, but your mind is far away. Instead of fighting it, I began to let it be. During breaks, I stepped outside more often. I did not go anywhere special, just outside the building. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching people walk by. Everyone seemed to be going somewhere. Some walked quickly, some talked on the phone, some laughed. I wondered how many of them felt lost too. That thought did not comfort me, but it made me feel less alone. In the evenings, I resisted the urge to fill every moment with noise. No videos, no endless scrolling. Sometimes I turned on a small lamp and sat quietly. Sometimes I cooked something simple, moving slowly, paying attention to small actions. The sound of water boiling, the smell of food warming in the pan. These details grounded me. They reminded me that I was here, in this moment, in this ordinary life. There were still moments of heaviness. Some nights, the questions returned. What am I doing? Where is this going? How long will I feel like this? The questions did not demand answers. They simply stayed. I learned that not every question needs to be solved immediately. Some questions are meant to be carried for a while. On weekends, I stopped forcing myself to be productive. I did not create big plans. I did not chase motivation. I walked. I rested. I let time pass without judging it. There was guilt at first. A voice in my head told me I should be doing more, trying harder, figuring things out faster. But another voice, quieter, asked something different. What if this slow period has a purpose? I did not know the answer, but I stayed with the question. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on a bench in a park. The weather was mild. Nothing dramatic. Children played nearby. Someone walked a dog. Leaves moved gently in the wind. I sat there longer than I expected. There was no sudden insight, no clear direction, just a feeling of being part of the scene, not separate from it. I realized how long it had been since I allowed myself to simply exist without needing to improve myself. That realization stayed with me. In conversations with friends, I noticed a change. Once they asked how I was, I paused before answering. Sometimes I said, I don't really know. It felt strange to say that out loud. See, vulnerable, honest. Some people changed the subject. Some nodded quietly. A few stayed with me in the silence. I learned something from those moments. Not everyone knows how to respond to uncertainty. And that is okay. Late at night, when everything was quiet, I reflected on how this phase began. Not with a breakdown, not with a crisis, just with a slow fading of excitement. I realized how easy it is to miss the beginning of a change, especially when it arrives quietly. We often expect life to shift with noise, with events, with clear signs. But sometimes, change enters softly, almost politely. It waits for us to notice. There were days when I still felt disconnected, days when the emptiness returned. But there were also days when I felt something else. A small sense of calm, a gentle awareness. It did not last long. But it appeared more often. I began to understand that feeling lost does not mean standing still. Sometimes it means moving slowly, without a map. This phase of my life was not teaching me where to go. It was teaching me how to stay, how to sit with uncertainty, how to listen, how to breathe through the quiet. I stopped asking myself when this feeling would end. Instead, I asked a softer question. What is this moment asking of me right now? Sometimes the answer was rest. Sometimes it was patience. Sometimes it was simply honesty. I did not fix my life. I did not reinvent myself. But I stopped running from the feeling that something needed to change. And that was enough for now. Because before direction becomes clear, there is often a season of stillness. A season where life slows down so we can finally hear ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, this quiet phase was not a mistake. It was a necessary pause, inviting me to stay, to feel, and to wait. The quiet did not disappear, but it began to change its shape. It was no longer something I tried to escape from. It became something I learned to recognize. Some mornings, I woke up and noticed the silence first, before noticing myself. The world felt still, as if it was waiting. I made my coffee slowly, standing by the window, watching the street below. People passed by, each carrying their own invisible weight. I wondered how many of them were moving through a season like mine, without words for it. At work, I stopped pretending that everything felt normal. Not out loud, not in any dramatic way, just internally. When I felt tired, I admitted it to myself. When I felt confused, so I did not push the feeling away. I noticed how much energy I used to spend trying to appear fine. Once I stopped doing that, I felt a little less exhausted. There were moments during the day when I caught myself staring at nothing, a blank screen, a wall, the sky outside the window. At first, that worried me. I thought something was wrong with me. But slowly, I realized those moments were pauses, not problems. My mind was resting, even if I did not fully understand why. In the evenings, I began walking without a destination, not to clear my head, not to think, just to move. The streets looked different at night, quieter, more honest. Streetlights cast soft shadows. Windows glowed warmly from inside homes. I imagined the lives behind those windows: dinner tables, conversations, arguments, silence. Life continuing in many forms while I walked alone. Sometimes loneliness followed me closely. Other times, I felt strangely connected to everything. Both feelings existed, often on the same walk. There was one evening when I stopped at a small bridge. I leaned against the railing, watching the water move slowly beneath me. The city reflected on its surface, distorted and broken. I thought about how that reflection felt familiar. Not clear, not whole, but still real. I stood there longer than planned. No music, no phone, just the sound of water and distant traffic. For the first time in a long while, I felt grounded. Not happy, not inspired, just present. That feeling stayed with me into the following days. I started noticing how often I rushed through life without noticing it. How quickly I ate, how quickly I walked, how quickly I tried to move on from feelings. This slow period was asking something different from me. It was asking me to stay, to sit with discomfort, to allow confusion, to let days pass without progress. That was difficult. We are taught to measure our lives by movement, by achievements, by visible change. This phase offered none of that. Some days, I questioned myself again. Am I wasting time? Am I falling behind? Should I be doing more? The questions came and went. I learned not to answer them immediately. I let them sit, like unanswered messages. Not everything needs a response right away. I spent more time alone, but it felt different now. Less heavy, less sharp. I listened to my own thoughts more carefully. Not the loud ones, but the quiet ones beneath. The ones that spoke slowly, almost gently. They did not tell me what to do. They told me how I felt. And that was enough. One afternoon, I met an old friend for coffee. We talked about simple things at first: work, weather, daily routines. Then there was a pause. He asked, "So, how are you really?" The question surprised me. I looked at my cup, watching the steam rise. I did not rush to answer. "I feel lost," I said finally, "but calmer than before." He nodded. He did not try to fix it. He did not offer advice. He just listened. That moment stayed with me. Not because it solved anything, but because it reminded me that being understood does not always require solutions. Sometimes it only requires space. After that day, I felt less pressure to explain myself. I stopped searching for the right words to describe this phase. Some experiences do not translate well into language. They are meant to be lived, not summarized. At night, lying in bed, I thought about the person I used to be, the version of me who always needed a plan, who needed certainty, who needed direction. I did not feel angry at that version. I felt grateful. That person carried me this far. But maybe, for now, I needed to be someone else, someone slower, someone quieter, someone willing to wait. There were still moments of doubt, still days when the emptiness returned, but they no longer felt endless. I noticed small shifts. A morning when I felt less resistance, an evening when I slept more deeply, a conversation that felt real. These moments were subtle, easy to miss, but they mattered. I began to understand that life does not always move forward in visible steps. Sometimes it moves inward. This phase was not about changing my life. It was about changing how I stayed with it, about learning to remain present even when nothing made sense, about trusting that clarity does not arrive on demand. It arrives when it is ready. I stopped asking myself what I should become. Instead, I asked something simpler. How do I want to move through today? Some days, the answer was slowly. Some days, quietly. Some days, with patience. None of those answers sounded impressive, but they felt honest. As the weeks passed, I noticed something unexpected. The feeling of being lost no longer scared me as much. It became familiar, manageable, almost like a companion walking beside me. It reminded me to pay attention, to slow down, to listen. I did not know where this period would lead. I still do not. But I know this much. This quiet phase was teaching me how to live without rushing toward the next version of myself. And maybe that was the lesson I needed before anything else could begin. The days did not suddenly feel different. There was no clear line between the time when I felt lost and the time when things began to shift. It happened quietly, almost without permission. One morning, I noticed that getting out of bed did not feel as heavy as usual. The feeling surprised me, not because I felt good, but because I felt neutral. That was new. I moved through the morning routine without resistance. I washed my face. I made breakfast. I stood by the window for a moment longer than usual. The world outside looked ordinary. Cars passed, people walked, life continued. But something inside me was not pulling away anymore. At work, I caught myself focusing for longer stretches of time. Not because I forced myself, but because my mind stayed. I finished a task and felt a quiet sense of completion. Not pride, not excitement, just acknowledgement. I noticed these moments without trying to hold on to them. I had learned by now that forcing meaning only pushed it further away. In the afternoons, I began taking the same path home, not because it was faster, but because it felt familiar. I knew which streets were quieter, which corners caught the light at a certain hour. Familiarity became comforting. It reminded me that not everything needed to be new to feel meaningful. Some evenings, I cooked without distraction. No phone, no background noise. I listened to the sounds of the kitchen, the knife against the cutting board, the gentle sizzle of food in the pan. These sounds grounded me. They brought me back into my body, back into the present. I realized how long I had lived inside my head, planning, worrying, questioning. This slow phase was teaching me something simple: to return. There were still moments of doubt. Some nights, the old questions returned. What if nothing changes? What if I stay like this forever? But the questions felt different now. Less sharp, less urgent. They no longer demanded answers. They simply passed through. I began sleeping better. Not longer. Deeper. I woke up less often during the night. And when I did not immediately reach for my phone. I lay there, listening to the quiet. The quiet no longer felt empty. It felt spacious. On one weekend, I cleaned my apartment, not out of motivation, not to improve my life, just because it felt right. I moved slowly, organizing small things: old papers, clothes I no longer wore, objects I had stopped noticing. Each small action felt like making room, not just physically, but mentally. I did not throw everything away. I did not change much, but the space felt lighter. Later that day, I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. Sunlight entered the room at an angle I had not noticed before. Dust floated in the air. I watched it quietly, feeling a strange sense of calm. It occurred to me that this was how change might look in real life. Not dramatic, not loud, just subtle shifts that slowly add up. I started speaking differently to myself. Less judgment, less pressure. When I felt tired, I rested. When I felt unsure, I did not immediately criticize myself. Know this was unfamiliar territory. I was used to pushing, to demanding more. Letting go felt risky, but it also felt necessary. In conversations, I noticed another shift. I listened more. I interrupted less. Not because I tried to be polite, but because I was genuinely present. I paid attention to pauses, to tone, to what was not being said. I realized how much I had missed before, simply because I was always thinking ahead. One evening, a friend talked about feeling stuck. As he spoke, I recognized the feeling immediately, but I did not offer advice. I listened. After a while, he stopped talking and sighed. "Thanks," he said. "I just needed to say it out loud." That moment stayed with me. It reminded me how powerful simple presence can be. At night, lying in bed, I reflected on how far I had come, not in distance, but in awareness. I was still in the same job, the same apartment, the same life, but I was not moving through it the same way. The feeling of being lost had softened. It no longer defined every moment. It became part of a larger picture, not the entire frame. I began to sense something underneath the quiet. Not clarity, not direction, something gentler. Trust. Not trust that everything would work out, but trust that I could stay with whatever came next. I stopped demanding certainty from myself. I allowed days to be incomplete. Some days felt calm, some days felt heavy. Both were acceptable. This phase was not asking me to become someone new. It was asking me to stop abandoning myself when things felt unclear. And in doing that, something inside me began to settle. I did not feel ready for the next chapter, but I no longer felt afraid of it. I was learning how to live inside the pause without needing to escape it. And slowly, without announcement, that pause was becoming a place I could stand. By the time I noticed the change, it had already been happening for a while. There was no exact day I could point to, no clear moment when everything shifted. Life still looked the same from the outside. The same mornings, the same streets, the same quiet evenings. But inside, something had loosened. I no longer woke up with that familiar weight pressing down on my chest. It did not disappear completely, but it no longer controlled the entire day. I moved through my routine with less resistance. Not because I suddenly understood my purpose, but because I stopped fighting the uncertainty. Some mornings I felt calm. Other mornings, say I felt unsure again. Both were part of the same process. I began to notice how much pressure I used to place on myself to always know what came next, to always be moving forward, to always be improving. That pressure had shaped my life for years. And now, slowly, I was learning how to release it. I paid more attention to my limits. When I felt tired, I rested without guilt. When I needed space, I allowed myself to take it. These choices were small, almost invisible, but they changed how my days felt. I realized that clarity does not arrive when we demand it. It arrives when we create enough space for it to appear. I did not suddenly find answers. I did not wake up one day knowing exactly where my life was going, but I began to trust something else, my ability to stay present even when the path ahead was unclear. There were moments when I felt a quiet sense of direction, not a plan, not a goal, just a gentle pull, a feeling that I did not need to rush, that I did not need to force the next chapter, that whatever came next would come in its own time. I thought about the earlier version of myself, the one who felt lost, tired, and disconnected, the one who believed that feeling uncertain meant something was wrong. I wished I could sit beside that version and say something simple. You are not broken. You are listening. Because this phase was not about failure. It was about slowing down enough to hear what had been buried under noise, to notice what felt empty, to recognize what needed care. This quiet period was not wasted time. It was necessary time. Time to rebuild trust with myself. Time to learn patience. Time to stop running. I still did not know where my life would lead, but I no longer felt afraid of that not knowing. I had learned how to live inside the pause, to move slowly, to breathe, to stay. And sometimes that is where real change begins. Not with big decisions, not with dramatic moves, but with the courage to remain present in ordinary days. If this story feels familiar to you, if you are moving through a quiet, uncertain phase of your own life, know that you are not alone. Sometimes life slows down because it is preparing you for something deeper. If you want to continue listening to stories like this, stories about real life, slow moments, and the quiet spaces we all pass through, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep sharing these gentle English stories. Do one ordinary day at a time.